There you go.
It's a prop of introspection.
Yeah, we're live, by the way.
Oh,
Welcome, everyone, to Personality Quest. This is Sunday, February 4th, 2024. Already, we're in 2024, rolling along into February now, a brand
Oh
new
my
month, the
gosh.
month of love, right? This is the month when people, for some reason, because Valentine's Day is here, I think a lot of people think about relationships this month. And that seems to be the running theme in a lot of ways. But today, I want to tell a little bit of story about a friend of mine who was an ESTJ, had ESTJ preferences. He got married in New York City. He wasn't from New York City, though. He was from Podunk, Indiana, like the middle of the country, like out, in the middle of the Midwest. So he gets married to a woman from New York City, and his entire family comes to New York City. And they're not really used to coming to a big city. Clearly, it's the largest city in the US, one of the largest cities on the planet. And so they were really discombobulated and out of sorts. So my friend took them all under his wing. And he spent time during his, he's supposed to be getting married and it's supposed to be about him. But here, as an ESTJ, he finds himself caretaking all of his family and friends and people that came out to the experience to be out there. And I think I learned a lot about ESTJs through that experience. I watched how he quietly just caretook for people around him. Even though it was his big day, him and his wife that were getting married, it was very interesting to see how much he just handled things. He showed love by handling a lot of logistics for people around him. And so I think that there's some things we can learn from ESTJs. Today, we're going to turn toward the ESTJ personality type because we're in this series right now looking at all the different types, all 16 types. Last week, we talked about ESFPs. How can that type love themselves using the wiring of their personality? How does an ESTJ, that's what we'll talk about today, love themselves? What does it look like to love all the parts of who they are? And then what can we learn, all the other 15 types that aren't ESTJs, what can we learn from them about self-love that we can apply to our own selves? So that's what we want to unpack today and talk about. So if you are an ESTJ watching or listening and being part of this right now, this is going to be all about you. And if you have an ESTJ energy in your life, somebody around you, maybe it's a partner, family, friend, coworker, boss. A lot of times we have bosses that are this type, right? Like managers and people in positions of supervision over us. This might be a very interesting conversation on today's Personality Quest. So welcome.
Yeah, that made me think a lot of ESTJs being bosses, probably because they're the ones that are selflessly handling the logistics so that business can happen. And so it naturally rises them to the top. And by default, after a couple of years, we decide, okay, the person handling logistics, that's the boss.
Yeah, that's true. And I know plenty of ESTJs who are like that. They kind of bring that mentality to their personal lives as well. Like I know an ESTJ stay-at-home mom who handles her family kind of like somebody would handle a business. And so, she's kind of the boss in that context too, but not in a way that's like overbearing or anything, but it's like she just handles everything. And so I can't remember exactly the clip that we're going to do. I probably should know the exact beginning and the end, but I do remember recording the podcast. And one of the things we talked about is, and something that might be a bit of a pain point for some people or some of those with ESTJ preferences is a lot of the stuff that they offer and bring to the table. They don't necessarily get gratitude back for it because it's one of those things that you don't know is happening until it stops happening, right? Like it's just maintenance, right? It's like the maintenance of life and the maintenance of making sure everything is happening. And so it's very easy. And some people with EFJ preferences also experience this. I'm sure you resonate with that also, Jonathan, is a lot of the stuff that, EFJs do is also things that you don't notice until they stop. And then you're like, hey, why isn't that thing happening? And it's like, well, because the person who was doing it got burned out or they felt like they were giving without receiving gratitude back. So while somebody with ESTJ preferences, of course, needs to learn to self-love and to have a relationship with themselves, as somebody who does not have those preferences, part of what I can be doing to show up and help facilitate that is to recognize the things that are not usually seen, right? Is to say thank you for all the stuff that like I don't even know what they're doing, but I know they're doing a bunch of stuff and they're not necessarily doing it with fanfare. So how can I show gratitude? And that will be the conversation in Quest, by the way. So I don't want to, I don't want to like steal the thunder too much.
Already I'm thinking like I probably do a lot of things with fanfare. I probably extrovert a lot of like what I'm doing. And so I don't know if I can appreciate like a more ESTJ energy that's doing things without credits, without announcing, hey, everyone, I'm cleaning the house. Hey, everyone, I'm doing this for you, and making a big deal. Because I mean, I'll do things out in the world, but I'll make sure like there's a giant banner over my name. Hey, everyone, I'm doing this. And I've noticed maybe extroverted feeling sometimes does that. So I can appreciate the quietness, like behind the scenes, tiny credit of extroverted thinking, just handling it all.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think I've had the experience of my grandmother had ESTJ preferences. I had the experience of during for my grandparents' 50th anniversary, I remember writing a letter. I think I told you guys this about when we were planning today's call. I wrote her a letter expressing her and my grandfather expressing basically in the letter. I said, listen, I don't know what sacrifices you made for the family. I can't pretend to know your entire life, married for 50 years, the things you did to like make it all work, to stay together that long, to contribute to my mom and her brother and her sister and the whole ecosystem. But there had to have been stuff you did. There had to have been sacrifices you made. There had to have been things that I will never know, and it was just on you to know. And I just want you to know I'm grateful for those. Clearly that nothing happens in a vacuum, and hard work went into this. So thank you for doing that. And I remember my grandmother, ESTJ, my grandfather liked it. Both of them liked it, but she like framed it. Like she had it like, she's passed away now. Both of them are passed away, but like she like thought this was so important. Probably because there were parts of her that had been quietly serving in the background, that had been making sacrifices. And to have that reflected back to her, I didn't know the specifics. I just said, there's got to be stuff. And she knew what all those were. I didn't know what they were because I didn't live through that. And so I think that's something like ESTJs probably carry with them a lot. These quiet things they're doing and quiet loyalties they have that mean a lot to them. I think in those ways. And speaking of loyalties, I think my same friend at that same wedding was really having a hard time because another one of his friends had just like ghosted him. He wanted to be in the bridal party.
Well, he wanted him to be a groomsman,
right? And he didn't like.
And he was like, "Sorry, can't come to your."
Kind of blew him off last minute, and he's like deeply hurt. It's like I thought we were friends. I thought that was like it's like I've been quietly being here for you, but now I need you to show up and be in my wedding, and you didn't, and that was like a big deal. Like he was really hurt by that, like really hurt. And that was another awakening about the ESTJ.
Well, and the two of you had not really connected for quite a while.
Yeah.
They were childhood friends, right? They were friends when they were like, I don't know, since they were what, 12, 11. And so but they hadn't really like they went their separate ways. This friend was like, he ended up becoming a performer on a cruise ship. And so he was like traveling the world for like a decade. And so they just kind of hadn't connected in a long time. And then when he invited Joel to be in his, be one of his groomsmen, and Joel's like, yeah, let's do it. Like he went on and on and on about how grateful he was and how appreciative he was. And he got all of his groomsmen like commemorative, what was it, flasks, or like, it was like a big deal. And to harken back to that story about how he helped his family, I wouldn't say, I mean, his family is very nice, but I wouldn't say that they were necessarily directly appreciative. Because to them, they had to like go to New York for this wedding, and it was kind of like why do we have to do this? And it's like it was all overwhelming. And it was like kind of almost too much for them to be able to have the experience and also feel grateful for how much shepherding he had done, because it really facilitated them having as good of an experience as possible, being sort of fish out of water. And I don't think anybody was particularly grateful. I think they were still kind of salty that it wasn't happening in their home turf. And yet he did that not for them exclusively, but also for his wife. Right. Yeah. He showed her love by just handling his family and getting them in as positive a spirit as possible so that she could have in-laws that were like, he made the experience as good as he could for them to be as generous and happy in that experience as they could feel. And so she got to have her wedding in her home turf and also have in-laws that were as positive as possible. And he just facilitated all of that by taking care of it. Yeah. And this is all like, I don't think anybody would have seen that. Like Joel and I were talking about it. We're like, he's doing a thing here. Right. Yeah. And I don't think people would normally necessarily see all of that and give it gratitude and give it credence. But it's like, that's the kind of wordless stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have like 3 ESTJs that I know that they're just amazing workers and really do a lot of things behind the scene. Well, do an inordinate amount of things behind the scene.
Yeah.
and are really good at just concisely saying what they do. Like, I did this, 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 and it sounds like, oh, no big deal. But because their language is so concise, you think, oh, that was easily handled. That seems so
Right.
simple. But
Right.
really, the grunt work and the labor and the effort that's put into it.
Mhm.
I'm thinking like tax season. We have an ESTJ that's just managing all this business tax stuff. Has been working on it for like a month, quietly in the background, no announcements, just getting it all done. I'm like, that is a massive undertaking for a
Mhm.
multi-million-dollar company, just handling all these taxes. So it just there's a lot that goes on. So I'm appreciative.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's good to have an ESTJ love fest every once in a while,
Yeah.
because I think particularly in type
Yes.
communities, I for some reason, like every system, every community has like, the people who it's okay to like put bad stuff in that bucket for some reason. It's okay to,
Mhm.
stockpile ESTJs. And I think that it's oftentimes because ESTJs are doing the thing that needs to be done, and nobody likes to be reminded of all the stuff that needs to be done that they don't want to do. Right. And it's not
Mhm.
always like, in order to get like, what kind of state does a person have to be in to constantly and perpetually be doing all the stuff you don't want to do? You have to be in a very direct, candid, shut your emotions off, just keep moving state. And other people can be like, what? How dare you? And it's like, well, but they're keeping everything running. Like,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily fun, but it has to be done. And if we stop every 2 seconds to check in with everybody's feelings, it's like nothing will, civilization collapses, right? So you have to have a balance. And we are all running away from something. And it's understandable for somebody with these type preferences to maybe run away a little bit from, some emotional stuff, content that needs to be brought up, or, like whatever uncertainty is being kicked up into their own, like whatever's going on inside of them. Like, that's the burden to bear if you have ESTJ preferences, is that that's the stuff that's going to be the easiest to compartmentalize, put over there, not address for a long time. But it doesn't but we're all doing it somehow, right? Like, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm just doing it with my sensing function, right? So it's like we're all doing it. So is it worse when this person's doing it, or is it worse when that person's doing it? Because somebody might be very emotionally sensitive and like not get anything done. And is it like, is that the better call? I don't know. Seems kind of
Well,
like, yeah.
is that like a growth point for ESTJs, that maybe it's time to bring a little bit of that work to the surface, or maybe bring a little fanfare to the life? I don't know, like bring fanfare to life. That
Yeah.
sounds like a bigger call. So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about.
Well, and in the series of how to love yourself as each, or how to love each personality type when you are that type, a big piece of it is that we have to set reasonable expectations for ourselves. And but that includes doing stuff we don't want to do. And so the whole series is like, you love yourself because you're not withholding love, since you didn't meet an expectation for yourself. Like, I expected this or expected this, or just having unreasonable or uncalibrated expectations. And so, like we talked about in the ESFP podcast, we should have high expectations for, say, our driver function, right, in the car model.
Yeah.
And if we get lazy in our driver function, if we just go, I'm just good at that, and we don't have high expectations for ourselves there, our inner wisdom knows that we're leaving money on the table. It knows that we're not doing all that we could be. And so we sometimes taste a little bit of like disappointment in ourselves that we're not doing our best. And the same thing with our co-pilot. But we have to set more reasonable expectations for ourselves in our 10-year-old and our 3-year-old functions. If we set high expectations in our 10-year-old function, we withhold love until we show up in that way in our 10-year-old function. We'll be withholding love for a long time. And especially that 3-year-old. So it's a lot of loving ourselves is about making sure that we are allowing ourselves to feel love and honor when we truly are doing our best, while knowing that sometimes our best in some areas is not going to be like another person's best. They're going to outclass us, 10 to 1.
Yeah.
So then that's part of that emotional piece, right? But we all still need to have expectations for ourselves there.
Yeah.
Right. We still need to expect ourselves to show up in that way.
All right, let's put a pause on this conversation. If you're just joining us, welcome to Personality Quest. Sunday morning, it's February 4th, 2024. Joel Mark Witt, Antonia Dodd, Jonathan Harden. Producing today is Karina Gunyon. And we are rolling into a clip from our most recent podcast. Hasn't been released yet. Talking about how to love yourself as an ESTJ. We took a portion of that. We're going to watch it together. At the end of this clip, just a few minutes in, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about what we learn out of this. How can we apply self-love from an ESTJ's framework to all of ourselves going through this crazy journey of life together?
And these clips are usually from the perspective of how can we appreciate, like what is something we can appreciate about this type if we don't have ESTJ.
Yeah, we don't learn it. So Karina, I think we're ready to go to that clip now. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll see everybody right after this.
So then, I mean, tuning back into this idea of expectations, that's kind of that's the heuristic, or that's the word I'm going to carry through all of this. The expectation is pretty high here for an ESTJ. This part of yourself, if you're an ESTJ listening or watching right now, you can expect a lot because you have a lot of capacity here. Now, you may not have the skill built, but you probably have the natural wiring and talent for these things. So yeah, you might still have to go and build some skill, get some knowledge, get some experience, but you should be able to expand the capacity of this part of yourself pretty big. And so to be in relationship with the self around this, that container for the love to be passed back and forth with the self, this can have high expectations. Yeah. This isn't a part of you that you let it pass. Like, oh, well, he's trying. Right. Not that kind of energy. It's like, no, get up. We got to do this. We got to get on this kind of thing. And I will love myself freely regardless and be forgiving and loving toward myself. But I really do expect myself to show up here.
Yep.
That's really what we're positing for this part of you.
Well, and if it gets really bad, the person can use this function to be destructive.
Yeah.
So instead of making progress and building things, they're actually destructive and regressive.
Yeah.
Right? They're not making progress. They're doing the opposite. And that really is they're not registering that. Even if they're not like, no, I love myself. But at the end of the day, in the quiet times at night, when you're like laying in bed thinking, there's not a lot of like there's a sense, sometimes a crippling sense of insecurity of I'm wasting time. I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my opportunities. Yeah. I could be doing more.
I think there's a sentiment. I just want to take a quick caveat here because there is a sentiment in the world that it's almost like this function is wrong. Like this part of somebody is wrong because they're attuned to the non-people metrics. Mm-hmm. People can be factored, but they're tuned to resource, bottom lines. And I think in our modern world, it's like, that's not okay. You need to take people into account. People are the highest ethic. Yeah, it's nice that you got that business thing done, or that career management thing or whatever it is, but really it's about people. It's about the double bottom line. It's about more of the soft stuff. And sometimes a person that has this wiring doesn't really, their aptitude isn't tuned into that. It's not that they don't care about people. They care deeply about people. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit here, how this type shows up. But the expectation from the world is that you're going to have a kind of a soft, well, when we get to the FJ personality types, there's an expectation that these types will show up like a feeler judger in the Myers-Briggs system, right? With an extroverted feeling or harmony framework. It's like, it's almost like this can be demonized sometimes in our world. We really need that other one instead. Mm-hmm. And that could be an unconscious message that you undervalue what you bring if you're an ESTJ, because you're like, well, I'm not doing it right. I don't care about people enough or something you might tell yourself because the world's telling you this.
Yeah.
But you can care about people with this function and with this framework. It's totally possible.
Well, I think actually the world needs a lot more of this. We had a lot before, and there have been time periods in history where there's been some overreach in the energy of this function.
Yeah.
But I think right now we're starving for this. We're starving for people who think in not double bottom line, but bottom line thinking. Sometimes taking people into consideration as individuals actually ends up harming them.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, I've seen this happen where an individual overly taking them into consideration.
I do this all the time.
I know. Well,
with our team.
That's how I've seen it.
I try to build something around the person rather than making them fit the system. And then the system has all these rogue things now.
Or over giving to an individual in a way that's not healthy for them. Overly taking them into consideration when really they never had that kind of relationship with you.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to give back. It's not reciprocal. It's just hyper focusing on the individual that's not what the world exclusively needs. We need that energy in there.
Yeah.
But we don't only need that energy. We need people who are willing to do hard things, even if nobody likes it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm an ESTJ and I'm looking for an access point for self-love here. Mm-hmm. Expectation access point for self-love here. Let's see if we can kind of zoom in on that. What how do we land this here? What this part of me, my driver part is an ESTJ, if I'm an ESTJ listening right now.
Right. Well, ambition isn't a dirty word. And so if you feel like a drive to make bigger and bigger things happen, to build career capital, to take care of the people in your life through primarily the mechanism of resource, not not exclusively, but primarily, like you're taking care of people by making sure that they are resourced and okay.
Yeah.
Those are good. Those are beautiful. Those are necessary. So as you see yourself doing that and taking on more responsibility and being decisive and helping lead things, projects, etc., while you're building your competencies and capacities for it, you have well-earned self-confidence.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have earned the sustainable relationship with the self. You can't earn love again, continue to free flow love, but this is a wonderful access point for self-trust and self-confidence. And a lack of those two things oftentimes obstruct people from feeling the full love for themselves.
Okay, so this idea of ambition, and that also would include hierarchy, which you have to be okay with, because often if you have a lot of resource you're managing, that means you're over top of all that resource, and that includes people, and that means a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. It's probably very easy for you as an ESTJ, if you're listening and this is your type, for you to think that this is how you earn love. Like this is probably where it goes off the rails the most, is if you do have competence and you do follow your ambition and you do get hierarchy, it's like you might get to the top and go, why don't I feel like I love myself here?
Yes.
I've gotten all this accolades. I've generated all this resource. I still don't feel good about myself. I still don't have self-love with all this accomplishment. So you could have all the accomplishment and still not have self-love. And that, I think that's really where we have to unlock for the ESTJ at this point.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to earn love through the resource and through the skill and through
the management. Yeah.
But you will undermine your ability to feel full self-love if you are not taking advantage of those talents. So this is not the formula for love, but an undermining element is if you you're not pushing yourself as hard as you could in this way. Like you will feel so much more self-trust and self-confidence if you are not leaving money on the table here. So it's more like, it's less of here's how you earn love. I mean, it's not a formula for earning love, but it is a component in making sure that you're not undermining your own sense of self-confidence, which when you do that, then it's harder to feel a full expression of love.
So it's more about undermining than it is about the transactional nature of self-love. And I think that's really what we're trying to say is self-love is not transactional, and ESTJs in particular, a couple other types are like this as well, can conflate that very easily.
Yes.
So we're trying to create a separation.
Yeah. I know
for you specifically.
Everything I'm saying probably sounds very convoluted, but just basically like, do your best here. Don't be dishonest with yourself about what your best is. Be honest about what your best is. Do your best, and you'll remove an obstruction for feeling self-love.
And I think we're talking to two different ESTJs. One is one that hasn't gotten into their full ambitious self yet. I think that's who you're speaking to.
Yes.
And I'm speaking to the one that's sitting at the top of a company or high management, middle management maybe, that's like, I keep accomplishing, but I don't feel any better about myself.
Right. Which is why it's not the end of the algorithm. It's not the end of the formula.
Okay. Let's talk about what can the rest of us, the other 15 personality types, learn from the ESTJ's framework of self-love. So as we look at the ESTJ and we are helping them find self-love, how can the rest of us learn from this? What's a takeaway that we can apply to ourselves through the process?
Well, I think when an ESTJ has dialed this in, when they've really tapped into true self-love, there's no need for bluster. There's no need to try to brag or prove to other people how good they are. There's no they've stopped the transactional component of love because they've built a non-transactional relationship to self. Like they're going to love themselves through anything. And so because of that, what ends up happening, and it's inspirational, but you have to watch for it. This is the difference. Like we talked about ESFPs and how they can be inspirational through their like grit and their resilience. When an ESTJ has really dialed this in, what you see is a form of quiet benevolence. You'll see a supportive person who does so without needing validation from others. Sometimes this can look like staying up late and helping a colleague work on a project, right? Just kind of volunteering like, no, I'll help you out. It can look like offering support in sort of a quiet way, like as in we don't have to publicize this. Let's just solve this problem for you as an individual, like helping a person with a difficult issue and challenge without needing it necessarily to be public, right? Like they just quietly help somebody.
Yeah.
Or maybe an example could be like a manager that offers like support to an employee that might be going through a hard time, like offer extra resources while still maintaining their dignity and their privacy, right? It's like, or maybe it's a mentorship.
Taking on extra training, helping guide other people at the office or in your personal life or something like that.
Yeah, or being attracted to just kind of taking somebody under your wing and helping them sort of break ground for them, but a trail that you've walked. So it's I think people with ESTJ preferences can be quite inspirational in their ability to do these things for themselves, but also for other people without having to trumpet it. And it's like, yeah, no, that's just a solid person. That's just a really solid person who has figured out how to be of service in a practical way to others without any fanfare, with just doing it beautifully and preserving everybody's dignity. And I think I personally find that highly inspirational.
Well, love is a complex topic and it's a complex concept. And a lot of people have a lot of different views on love and a lot of different aspects of it. But I think when we talk about it in the framework we're talking about it, I think we do say that love is a verb. It's an action we take toward others and the self. Like love is expressed. Like without expression, how does the love get passed? So if you take that, love is a verb, it's about action. ESTJs can often be about action. They can often be about expressing something or expressing, it's my words for it, right? Because I'm introverted feeling. It's about doing something. It's about action in the outer world. And I think that's a really beautiful part of the ESTJ that I tune into to learn from, to say, one of the things they can teach us, this benevolent, what did you say? No,
quiet benevolence.
Quiet benevolence, right? Quiet benevolence. That's action focused. It's quiet, but it's still, benevolence is action. It's doing something, giving something, contributing something. I'm looking at an ESTJ going, an ESTJ that's doing that as an ENFP preferences, I can learn a lot by going, okay, how are they able to do that without needing the credit? Because an ENFP, at least me as an ENFP, I want the credit for everything. I want the authorship. That's that's actually the reward, more than the money, more than the status. It's knowing my name was on something. I know that's my motivation. So, but I'm looking at that going, well, what if I didn't need the credit? That's a really interesting way to look at contributing through action, through showing love, through a verb. Like, I think that's a lot I can personally learn from an ESTJ. And I think everybody has something they could probably tune into that around the quiet benevolence. I'd be very interested in how somebody else that's a different type is interpreting that and how they can get a takeaway for their own life and how they're wired.
Yeah.
Like, what's your takeaway? When you think about quiet benevolence, how do you relate it? Maybe give another example. How would you think in terms of relating it to yourself? Is it something that you don't really need credit for things already. So
no, but
the same wouldn't apply to you.
I admire, the reason why I take inspiration from it is more about the willingness to have people misunderstand your intent or like your character.
Yeah.
If you do it without the fanfare, it means that people might not see. So
it's
they
their
might
business.
not. That's right. So they might take an accurate assessment of your character. I mean, how many people have they
may project bad intent onto it.
That's right. Like railed against somebody who, was like pushing them too hard or whatever.
They're just greedy. They're just wanting what they want. It's like they have no idea the motivation.
And they don't see all this good work because that's not being advertised. Right.
Yeah.
And so the willingness to have people misunderstand your character and intent and still continue to do it because you're validating that you're doing it because it's important to you and you want to be of service and because you love yourself and you want that abundance of self-love to then be demonstrated to others.
Yeah.
That to me, it's like, well, that's hard to do. It's hard to do, to not need, in your case, you're calling it credit. In my case, I'm calling it being willing to have your intent misconstrued.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I mean, what's the phrase? Be a good person, but don't take time to prove it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not trying to prove it. I'm just being it. And I think that's the lesson I take.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, Personality Quest, Joel Mark Witt, Antonia Dodge, Jonathan Harden. Producing today is Karina Gunyon. We're talking about ESTJs. And this is a clip we just watched from the episode, How to Love Yourself as an ESTJ. So we talked directly to the ESTJ in this episode. For the bulk of it, we talk about their car model out of the ESTJ Owner's Manual. We bring the car model up and we talk about the 4 functions, their driver, co-pilot, 10-year-old, 3-year-old, and the different expectations they might have at all those different places to show themselves self-love. And then at the end of that episode, and you just saw this clip, we pulled out some of that material to say, well, what else can the rest of us learn from ESTJs? What's the takeaway? And we came up with this concept, Jonathan, about quiet benevolence. What a big, it sounds like a broad, big term, but I think it just means doing cool things behind the scenes without the credit, right?
Yeah. I can't help but think of all the ESTJs that I know now. I like, I want to tell all these stories about everyone. And,
right.
Well, and y'all went through the entire car model for the podcast, right?
That's right.
So I have a ESTJ friend who, now that I think about it, she is an amazing manager of her home. Both of her kids require some sort of extra care in her life. So she's got tons of stuff to manage, and she works full time for a paralegal company or something like that. It's just very business oriented stuff. But I introduced playing tabletop role playing games like D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, to her. And I remember thinking, oh, wait, her 10-year-old exploration, extroverted intuition got to come out and play. Because, I was there kind of keeping the perimeter, saying, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm in charge. I'm managing all the stuff. And I think it was a good example of how an ESTJ can let her exploration, extroverted intuition come out and play, create chaos, break rules, steal things, no consequences, try out new ideas, and then kind of go back to the quiet benevolence of taking care of home, business, family, and all that stuff. So I think that was a good example of just the whole function getting some love.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed that we can sometimes have a blind spot to how much positivity people with ESTJ preferences can bring, to a point where I've noticed that it's almost like people resist the type, like being that type, because there's such a bad stereotype around the people with ESTJ preferences. So sometimes we don't get to see the more beautiful examples because we mistype them as not ESTJs, right? Or they don't. They'll see themselves maybe as a feeling type, or they'll see themselves as maybe a perceiver type.
Yeah.
And so we have this really locked in stereotype. But like you talked about, that playfulness. Going back to the example of Joel's childhood friend, he's a pianist at a dueling piano restaurant in New York City, and he got that gig from and he's amazing. He has like a mind like a steel trap. Once he learns a song, he will remember it for eternity. And so he can play anything, like name any song on the planet and he can play it. And he spent years and years and years headlining on cruise ships as a performer, because he's just got this amazing ability. Anything that somebody shouts out, he knows the song and he can play it, and he does it really, really
like
lovely.
Sweet Caroline type stuff,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
That's
Yeah, exactly. And he knows and he's like an encyclopedia of music, and he's an encyclopedia of particularly pop, because that's what everybody wants him to play
at weddings and cruise ships.
Right, exactly. He's been everywhere. He's been to Antarctica. I don't know anybody better traveled than him. I don't know anybody who's more, he's just got this creativity, but he also has a humility about it. He's like, I'm not an artist, I'm a performer. And I'm like, you're an artist too. And he's like, but I'm a performer. Like, there's this modesty about him.
Yeah.
His wife bought him as a wedding gift so many hours in a studio for him to write his own music and go into the studio to record his own music. And a year later, he's like, I still haven't used it. He's like, because I'm shy. And it was like it was a sweet little introverted feeling moment for him, where he's like, I'm shy. He's like, I don't know why. He's like, I've been playing the piano since I was a kid. It's like, but going in and writing my own music, it was like
Too much of himself on the line.
Yeah. And it was so sweet how shy he was about it. And Yeah, it was, I don't know. It's just like, he's such a great example in my mind of an ESTJ that like, you know,
Well, that makes me think
stereotypes.
a lot with ESTJs. I know ESTJs who have given and given and given so much in a performance mode.
Mhm.
Like I'm producing, I'm performing, but then all of a sudden, when things are turned indirect inside themselves, possibly to that introverted feeling,
Mhm.
it's nerve-wracking. Like, am I allowed to just enjoy this for the sake of myself?
Right. Yes.
Oh yeah.
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 And and that's this, you can see the dichotomy between extroverted thinking and introverted feeling, and how important it is to have that whole touch points of love spread throughout the entire functions.
You got it.
Yeah. All right. So here's what we want to do for all of our Quest members that are on the private Quest call. If you're joining us live streams, we're going to be ending this in just a little bit to go more into the private membership experience. But if you're in that membership, I'm asking Karina to produce rooms, create breakout rooms for us to go and have some small group discussions. I want everybody to be able to share today a little bit about this. Let's open up the concept. Let's open up the conversation for 12 minutes in these breakout rooms. Let's talk about this. Here's our prompt. Talk about the ESTJ influences in your life. Now, you may not be a profiler. You might have come through our profiler training program and be an expert profiler, although there's many people in Quest that are, that know how to profile. So you may not be able to identify ESTJs in your life, but they might self-report to you, or you might suspect it's that energy in your life. So just tune into kind of that energy that you would imagine is the ESTJ energy of your life if you're not a proficient profiler, let's say. Talk about the energies in your life, the people, but it also is beyond just people. There could be organizations that represent this energy, right? There could be activities that maybe you do that maybe represent this type of energy in your life. So tune into that. And then ask your group and talk about with your small group this idea of quiet benevolence. Is that something that maybe we can learn from the ESTJ energy cycle, whether it's in a person or it's in something more writ large? Is there a way we can learn a little bit more from this? What does it mean to have quiet benevolence? How would that maybe apply to my life or my ecosystem? How could I tune into that energy? Maybe display more of that. What does quiet benevolence mean to me? Do I always need the credit when I give? Or can I be more quietly behind the scenes? And that's a good, I think, question that all of us can ask. So, Karina, let's go ahead and open up those rooms. We'll see everybody back here in 12 minutes, and we'll start to unpack some of these concepts. We're going to go further into journaling, and then we're also going to talk about a personality quest for the week when we return. We'll see everybody in 12 minutes. And if you're still here on the live stream, we're going to be ending this in just a couple minutes. Thanks for being part of the Thanks for being part of the experience this week. And next week, we're going to be gathering again, 11:45 a.m. I think it's, what is 7 plus 4? I can't do the math in my head. 11th, February 11th, right? There we go. February 11th is going to be next Sunday, 2024. Join us in the live stream, but you really should be part of the Quest if you're watching this. Come and join a community of like minds. Learn type together. Let's go through this together. Let's learn about type by making it real, making it visceral, talking about it, making it dynamic, discussing it, applying it, not just studying it from a distance by ourselves through books, but genuinely getting our hands almost dirty with type, right? Not dirty with type, getting our hands like into the dirt of type or into the realness of it. That's what our appeal to you. So come over to personalityhacker.com/quest. We'd love to have you be part of this program every week, this membership, this academy that we're gathering together of like minds. And yeah, I think it'll be really cool. So Joel Mark Witt with Antonia Dodge signing off for Personality Quest this week. We will talk to you next week. Hopefully be part of the actual membership with us. Love to have you part of that.